I haven't cleaned my room in 11 years. All right, so today I made the decision. Well, more like a desperate last-ditch effort to clean my bedroom. This room has been a war zone for months, a combination of dirty laundry, snack wrappers, and random objects that I might need one day, like the sock I lost in 2017 or a receipt from a fast food joint I've long forgotten about. It's the Bermuda Triangle of my life. But today was the day. I woke up and thought, no more. I'm getting my life together. I was hyped, ready to conquer. I put on some music, grabbed a trash bag, and strutted into the battlefield. I started with the bed. I mean, how hard could it be? Just pull up the blanket, fluff a pillow, and boom. Success, right? Wrong. As soon as I pulled the blanket up, I was greeted by the first relic of my procrastination, a granola bar wrapper. Not just any granola bar wrapper, though. This one had seen some things. It was all curled up and dusty like it had been living in a cave for decades. Who knows how long it had been there? I couldn't even tell you how it got there, but it looked like it had been waiting for its dramatic moment of discovery. I got you, buddy, I thought, as I tossed it into the trash. And then right underneath it, another sock, just one. And we all know the deal with lost socks, they never come back. This was just a lonely survivor of some tragic sock war. I threw it in the laundry basket with a silent prayer for its missing twin. I was feeling pretty good about myself until I found something that I really didn't want to find. A plate. But not just any plate. This plate was covered in what could only be described as science experiments. Pizza sauce, dried cheese, and something that looked suspiciously like ranch dressing. I have no idea how long it's been there. It probably predates the dinosaurs. I didn't even want to know how it got there, so I just tossed it into the trash like a burial at sea. Then, the real journey began, the floor. Let me paint a picture. Imagine a sea of clothes, everywhere. It was like my wardrobe exploded, and now it was everywhere. I started digging through it, hoping to find something, anything, useful. And that's when I found it, my long-lost phone charger. But it wasn't just sitting there, waiting for me. Oh no, it had been buried under a pile of jeans like it was the world's most unhelpful treasure. At least it wasn't covered in mold, right? Then came the greatest find of the day, an old receipt from 6 months ago. Why do I keep receipts? Why was I holding on to this particular receipt? Was I planning on returning something? Who knows? But there it was, right next to a random McDonald's napkin I'm pretty sure I didn't even need. I'm pretty sure I'm just running a paper hoarding business in my room at this point. I mean, I found at least 5 coupons that expired in 2018. If I'm ever trying to cash in on a $5 off deal from 2016, I know where to look. By this point, I was starting to lose steam. How does this much stuff pile up in a room? Is my room secretly a black hole? Do I unknowingly acquire things in my sleep? I was beginning to think my room had a mind of its own. You're not going anywhere, it seemed to say as I moved items around, uncovering more chaos with every step. Then came the closet. You ever open a closet door and hear it creak like it's begging for mercy? Yeah, that happened. It was like opening the door to Narnia, but instead of snow, it was just pure clutter. The first thing I pulled out was a sweater I haven't worn in years. And as I shook it out, several receipts fell out. And I'm not talking 1 or 2. No, this was a receipt explosion. Receipts from fast food, receipts from stores I don't even remember, coupons for things that no longer exist. At one point, I even found an old business card from a job I don't even remember applying for. Who was I? And why was I keeping track of all this? Am I secretly an accountant? Hours later, after wading through piles of forgotten paperwork and trying to figure out where all these missing socks were coming from, I finally reached the point where my room was mostly clean. I wouldn't call it a paradise, but if you're squinting and standing at a weird angle, it's kind of passable. I mean, if a burglar broke in now, they'd have to search for my stuff before stealing it. So, progress. Anyway, I deserve a medal. Or at least a pizza. My room went from a post-apocalyptic wasteland to a slightly less chaotic place to exist in. And now I'm going to sit here on my almost clean bed, eat my leftover pizza, and reflect on how I just spent hours cleaning something that, in about 2 days, will be a mess again. But hey, I did it. I'm victorious. I accidentally became a wedding officiant. Okay, so this happened last summer, and I still cringe laugh every time I think about it. It all started when my buddy Greg invited me to his cousin's wedding. Now, I don't know his cousin. I had never met his cousin. But Greg said there'd be an open bar, and I'm not one to turn down free drinks. So I threw on a half-decent suit and showed up, ready to eat questionable chicken and sip on whiskey sours all night. Everything was going great until about an hour before the ceremony. I was hanging out near the bar, working on my second drink, when Greg came running up to me, looking like he had just witnessed a murder. Dude, we have a problem. Now, usually when someone says that, it's something like the DJ canceled, or grandma is mad because they didn't play enough Elvis. But no, the officiant never showed up, and for some reason, possibly because I was the only person standing still at that exact moment, Greg's cousin, the groom, pointed at me and went, "He looks responsible. Let him do it." Now, I would like to clarify, I am not responsible. I am not a wedding officiant. I had already had 2 whiskey sours and was nowhere near sober enough for this conversation. But in my slightly buzzed, overconfident state, I said something stupid like, "Oh yeah, totally, I can do that." Why? Why did I say that? Step 1. Google how to marry 2 people. The second they handed me a printed out script, which was apparently sent to the missing officiant, I power walked to the bathroom and frantically Googled how to legally marry people. That's when I discovered something important. I was not legally allowed to do this. I was not ordained. I had no authority. I was basically a guy in a clearance rack suit about to commit wedding fraud. So I did what any logical person would do. I walked back out there and pretended like I knew what I was doing. Step 2, the ceremony begins. So there I was, standing at the front, trying my absolute best to look official while also stifling a mild panic attack. The bride and groom were beaming, the guests were watching, I was sweating. I cleared my throat. Welcome everyone. We are gathered here today to join these 2 wonderful people in holy matrimony. So far so good, right? Then I glanced at the script and immediately realized that the actual officiant's name was printed in it multiple times. I froze. I had 2 choices. Try to say the name and risk butchering it. Ad-lib like my life depended on it. Guess which one I picked? Marriage is a journey, I started, stalling for time. It's about love, commitment, and compromise. Much like ordering pizza toppings, sometimes you don't always agree, but you make it work. Some people chuckled. Okay, decent start. The bride gave me a weird look, though. Probably because nowhere in their planned ceremony did it mention pizza. Step 3. Improvising the vows. The vows were supposed to be simple. I just had to ask them the standard, "Do you take this person to be your spouse?" and let them answer. But of course, my brain short-circuited. Instead, I turned to the groom and said, "Do you promise to love her, cherish her, and always let her have the last French fry even when you're really, really hungry?" The bride snorted. The groom, to his credit, just nodded seriously and said, "I do." Okay, cool. Got through that. Then I turned to the bride and for absolutely no reason blurted out, "And do you promise to love him, support him, and never binge watch a show you started together without him?" At this point, I heard Greg in the audience go, "Bro, what?" The bride paused. Then, after a dramatic moment, she sighed and said, "I do, but I make no promises about the Netflix thing." The guests lost it. Step 4, the grand finale. Now the final part was supposed to be, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." But remember, I had no power. I was just some random dude. So I went with, "By the power of the internet and the strong belief that no one here is going to report me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Applause, cheers, success. I had pulled it off. Step 5, the aftermath. After the ceremony, people kept coming up to me saying stuff like, "That was hilarious. How long have you been doing weddings?" Greg's cousin came up, shook my hand and said, "Dude, that was amazing. We couldn't have planned it better," which is funny because they did not plan it at all. So yeah, technically, I officiated a wedding illegally. But on the bright side, they got legally married later when a real officiant signed the paperwork. And the best part, they still owe me a drink for that one.
The time I accidentally kidnapped a dog who totally set me up. So let me start by saying, I am not a criminal. I have never stolen anything in my life, unless you count those little shampoo bottles from hotels, which, let's be honest, everyone takes. But last summer, due to a series of very unfortunate misunderstandings, I became a dog thief, at least for 45 minutes. Let me explain. It all started when I was out for my usual evening walk around the neighborhood. I don't have a dog of my own, but I love dogs, and I always see the same ones out and about. One particular golden retriever, who I later found out was named Bentley, was always hanging out in someone's front yard, chilling like he owned the place. He wasn't tied up or fenced in, but he never strayed too far. On this particular day, as I walked by, Bentley trotted right up to me with his tail wagging like we were old buddies. I gave him some pets, and he just wouldn't leave my side. Then I noticed something. He had a leash attached. Now, in my brain, this meant one of two things. Bentley had gotten loose, and someone was missing their dog. Bentley was the most independent dog ever and took himself on walks. I figured option number one was more likely, so I thought, well, I can't just leave him here. What if he runs into the street? So like any responsible citizen, I picked up the leash and started walking around the block, assuming I'd run into his owner. I even asked a few people if they knew whose dog he was, but no one had a clue. Meanwhile, Bentley was thrilled. He was prancing along happily, like, wow, a surprise adventure? For me? About 10 minutes in, I started getting a little worried. Where was his owner? I didn't want to just let him go, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I took him home to give him some water while I figured things out. This, as it turns out, was a terrible idea. The moment we got to my apartment, Bentley made himself at home. He flopped onto my couch, sighed like he had just completed a long day of work, and stared at me expectantly. I gave him water, texted my friend, who knows everything about our neighborhood, and asked if she had ever seen Bentley before. Her response? Oh my gosh, that's Mrs. Henderson's dog. She's been looking for him everywhere. Cue panic mode. Now, let me tell you something about Mrs. Henderson. She is an 80-year-old retired school principal with the energy of a drill sergeant and the eyes of a hawk. She is also terrifying. I did not want to be known as the girl who stole an elderly woman's beloved dog, so I bolted out of my apartment with Bentley in tow and sprinted toward Mrs. Henderson's house. I barely made it halfway down the block before I saw her. She was power walking down the street, scanning the area like Liam Neeson in Taken, probably ready to put up lost dog posters or tackle the first person who looked suspicious. Bentley? Oh, Bentley was overjoyed. The moment he saw her, he yanked me forward so hard I almost face-planted. He dragged me across the sidewalk, barking happily, as if I hadn't just unknowingly kidnapped him. Mrs. Henderson turned, saw me holding her dog's leash, and her eyes narrowed like she was about to sentence me to detention. Before she could say anything, I panicked and blurted out, I swear I didn't steal your dog. Not a great opener. Her frown deepened. Then why do you have him? I launched into the worst, most nervous explanation possible, rambling about how I thought he was lost, how I was trying to find his owner, how I definitely wasn't a dog thief, and how he was just so friendly, and I don't even know what else I said, because at some point my brain completely short-circuited. Mrs. Henderson stared at me for a long moment, then at Bentley, who was wagging his tail and looking completely unbothered. Then, out of nowhere, she burst out laughing. I was so confused. Apparently Bentley does this all the time. He just wanders off with people and lets them think they're rescuing him because he enjoys the attention. I had been played by a dog. Mrs. Henderson was actually really nice about it. She thanked me for looking out for Bentley, even though Bentley was clearly the mastermind here, and we laughed about how I almost went to jail, in my mind at least. Now every time I walk past Bentley's house, he still comes trotting over, leash attached, pretending to be lost, like I'm going to take him on another adventure. Nice try, buddy. Not falling for that again.